Hello everyone, and welcome to another Beyond Words. For those of you who've looked at the title and the subscriber count, you will have noticed that we have hit 50k, which is a big number and very exciting. And I did have an idea for something I wanted to do for this, but unfortunately that has not yet come to pass, but it may do, so keep an eye out. Until that happy day is upon us, I guess we're just gonna answer questions from a year ago. Oh dear. Actually, one of the reasons I wanted to answer these questions is that they're really good, and they cover sort of the length and breadth of things that I discuss on the channel, so I didn't have the heart to discard this. I think this is hopefully going to fill the 50k niche, and there are a lot more videos still on the way, so without further ado, let's ado this. How are you? I'm okay. Obviously, there are things playing on my mind and a lot of external circumstances that are affecting everyone right now, but other than that, I'm actually coping with it reasonably well. There's certainly a lot of things still to do. I've basically been working hard through the time to keep productivity up on the channel. I've had so many drafts that are finally coming out. You've already seen a couple of them now, and there's still a few more to get out there. And behind all of those, more things are being written, more things are being put in the pipeline. So I'm just really trying to put the effort in and make this thing count while it's still up and running. I mean, the fact we got to 50k is an exciting enough reason to keep pressing forward and trying to do things that are exciting and different and better than what you might have seen me do before. So obviously, you guys will be the voice to whether or not that's the case. So yes, things aren't so bad. Things are okay, and I'm coping pretty well. And I'm just hoping that that can keep going, and I can keep making that happen. So yes, thank you, moist asshole. Oh no, it's the Joker, baby. You've often said that you're not a fan of the idea of remakes, so what is a remake or reimagining you'd actually be excited to see? I'm assuming this is talking about video games, because whenever I talk about remakes on this channel, it's as video games. I don't have a problem with the idea of a remake generally. There are so many films that I love that are remakes. Often they're not just one-to-one recreations. There's someone who has a new angle or idea on just something they've seen in that original piece of work, and who just runs to the end of the field with it to see what they can come up with within those limits, or just anything they see within that concept they can expand on or do something interesting with. And that's perfectly valid to me. I mean, the truth is that if we were to really get down to it, everything is a remake of something, everything is a reimagining of something. There's that idea that there are only 7 stories, or there's only one, or whatever the end of The Amazing Spider-Man said. Who remembers? So, I'm not against the concept on its own. I think that there's a great conversation to be had about how many times we're just telling the same story or redoing the same idea, and how it's not about, tropes and cliches which people get very hung up on. It's really about the magic of the execution, and how we can still make people feel impacted by things we said however long ago. How all these things are still relevant, yet in exciting, fresh new ways. And that's interesting to me, and why I don't dismiss the concept of a remake or reimagining. However, it's when something becomes a one-to-one remake that I get a bit weirded out. It often seems like an exercise in futility, like it's already been done. Why would you do it exactly the same way again? There are very few movies that do the exact one-to-one thing, and sometimes when they do, you can tell that they're hurt by doing that, and people tend to always respond pretty badly to that practice. Now, with games, the difference is that, unlike movies, they're not terribly well preserved as time goes on, and there's still a hunger for people to revisit them, so it just becomes a good cash opportunity. You can take a team and have them rebuild something that's already been laid out and completed, and wow people with the current technology you've used to do that, as if we're seeing the game as it was always meant to be seen, and then we all kind of realise in 3 years' time it now looks just as dated. I'll always find the originals more valuable because they're these artifacts, these fossils encased in live earth. You can revisit them and get a better understanding of the time period they came from and why they were so popular to begin with. Whereas a remake is always a byproduct of that work. There's less to be said in the long run that doesn't draw us back to the necessity of the original. I have no idea if I'm really making sense. I think you get where I'm coming from. That's a good cop-out, B-Mask. This is why I appreciate the developers who recognise this is an issue and push for solid stylization before graphical power. And while, yeah, this will help them age better in the long run, it can also give an opportunity to the artists to flex their creative muscles and put their own stamp on the project, gives it a separate purpose to exist, and we've gotten some really nice results in a couple of them now. Ideally, you'd see reimaginings where they try to take the project in a different direction, do something really crazy and different with it, and that's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you get the Ratchet remake, which is just it's just a perfect encapsulation of how much Insomniac has changed, and how much you can't recapture the magic of the original with them anymore. And I worry the same might happen to Soulstorm and games like that. On the other hand, Resi 2 Remake is like the perfect middle ground where you're commenting on how much games have changed and how that can improve an experience or give it a completely different feel. Or something like CTR with all its new content. It feels like a brand new product. These are the kind of games I genuinely think the originals would have wanted to be, minus the microtransactions, of course. But really, the catch-22 is that the most interesting remakes are probably of bad games, or games that had squandered potential. But nobody's gonna be out here making a new Jinx, or Kingsley's Adventure. Kingsley's Adventure, who cares? I mean, I do, but I get it. They had their time, and they didn't get an audience, and the better way to go is to do what a lot of people are doing and make spiritual successors. At least that way the existence of the previous game has a knock-on benefit in the wider world. It's a really, really difficult discussion. There's a bunch of remakes I've really enjoyed, and a bunch of remakes, a large amount of remakes, that make me think, well, why bother? I just want to see people break out and make entirely new sequels and experiences altogether, and I think we're going that way. I think people are starting to get remake fatigue, and hopefully this is going to change even more after Crash 4 comes out, and I got a lot to say about that already, because that's the stuff I'm excited for. You have no idea. What are your favourite musical episodes in an otherwise non-musical show? Not that long ago, I started watching Quantum Leap, and I was watching the episode where he goes into the body of the guy about to go on for Man of La Mancha, and I loved it. Obviously, I'm a Man of La Mancha fan, so I was already pretty heavily biased towards it. But it was the fact that, on top of getting Scott Bakula to do the songs, which is huge plus, always, it was the fact that they got the emotional breadth of the show in that time span, in like, 30 minutes, 20 minutes? And it was great. I thought that was exactly the way to do it, and I was really, really invested. Whithersoever they blow, onward to glory I go. The interesting thing about doing musical episodes of live-action shows is always the logistics. Do they have the budget? Do they have the actors who can sing? How much are they going to have to rearrange the way they make stuff normally for an episode to make this happen? And often they're limited because of that. However, I think that the best ones often come from animated shows, because the nature of the medium means that the limitations are often less. You can do so much more interesting, funny stuff more immediately, and we have a wealth of history of musical episodes and animated shows, mostly because of this, I think. And there's a lot of good ones. There's a lot I could recommend. Wander Over Yonder is a top example. I think the melodies of that show are fantastic. I don't know that the lyrics are quite where I'd want them to be, but certainly the songs are just really fun and really well done.
A question again? something about herself. I'll question.
I did!
You gotta focus on someone else. If you want to win her, show some interest in her. If you want to date her, try to formulate a question.
One that always reaches above and beyond is Hey Arnold. I've yet to have a musical episode or moment of Hey Arnold I haven't liked.
The jolliest, trippin' folliest, by gosh, by golliest, watch out for that trolliest.
The Eugene episode is perfection itself. Anything to do with Dino Spumoni, with all of his songs about domestic violence, I guess.
Your wacky paintings on the walls, darling, pow! I'll smash them all.
One of the absolute kings for me is Brave and the Bold. It's ridiculous how good the songs are on that show, but most of all, Birds of Prey, which is just it's just in my head all the time.
No one does it better. No one does it better than the Birds of Prey.
You could put that on in a club right now, maybe not right now, and it would do gangbusters. As well it should. What is your dream theatre production, both to see or make, and what do you want to have unfold in the medium? If I had one request for something I'd like to see explored more often, it's something that was done way back when in the excellent musical The Music Man. The thing that's amazing about that show is it's about creating music from nothing. It's a con man who goes into a town and convinces everyone that he is a music teacher and that he is very gifted in creating music. And the show kind of does the same thing to the audience. So, the opening song is a bunch of salesmen on a train, and the music sounds like that.
You can bigger, 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 you can talk, bigger, bigger, bigger. You can talk all you want, but it's different than it was.
No, it ain't, but you gotta know the territory.
As we learn about the town librarian, she's giving a music lesson to one of the children. She's having an argument with her mother, and the music lesson with the child in the background becomes the sound of that argument.
Now, Mama, as long as the Madison Public Library was entrusted to me for the purpose of improving River City's cultural level, I can't help my concern that the ladies of River City keep ignoring all my counsel and advice.
I'm someone who believes that sound needs to tell the story. It needs to be appropriate to the story. And my worry is that we have so much less of a focus on that and a variety of that, and so much more of a very specific sound that everybody's looking for, that's the most modern, the most now, and that needs to happen. You always have to be creating, work in the moment and whatever it is you want to personally do, but I do see a lot of trend chasing that is more ubiquitous in musical theatre than in any other medium, and that's disappointing. I think you've got a lot of independent people who are just working in the same rulebooks and producing the same sounds all their peers are making, and I've yet to see someone really come out and do better than my boy Sondheim. So as soon as someone passes that bar, then you'll know I'll be a happy chappy.
If you feel a sense of coalition, then you never really stand alone. If you want your work to reach fruition, what you need's a link with your tradition, and of course a prominent commission, plus a little formal recognition, so that you can go on exhibition, so that your work can go on exhibition.
But yeah, having said all of that, I don't think I'm the person who's going to do it, because I can't compose for shit, and yet, unfortunately, this is the medium I find myself loving, so oops. But I have dreams for things that I would like to make that maybe would suggest elements of that, but this is all hypothetical. I hope that makes some sense. But yeah, I very much would like to see more musicals that are just really interested in the stories they're telling, that really want to get into the nuts and bolts of what they specifically have that no one else does. What is your word? Can you help me? I can't read this word. It says what's a workflow? Okay, here's another question that might be the same question. What is the thought process behind your scripts? Do you write almost as if the scripts are English essays, or is it a natural flow? It's a combination of the two. So what I do is I start with an idea, probably listening to too much music from a certain thing that I want to edit to or whatever, and I sit down and I type out just all the thoughts in my head, just all the things that I think are coherent, paragraphs that seem interesting, anything that I can get out from my brain to the page. And when I'm done with that, I look at what I've got and I start to punch it into the shape of an essay. I'll move paragraphs around, I'll look at things and go, that doesn't make sense, that does, I can do more on that, I can do less on this. And that begins to form itself into the shape of, I guess, what you would call an English essay. And then once that's done, I'll actually go backwards and start to rework it by reading it out loud and trying to make it sound more natural. And as I'm going, I'll be rewording and rewriting things so that it can seem like more of a natural flow from that point onwards. So it's this weird thing of starting loose, then treating it seriously, and then going loose again. That's kind of the way I approach all of my scripts. The best person for a more in-depth process video on this is Lord Mandalore. His video on making video essays is not only the closest to how I work and one of the most helpful videos on YouTube, but also has horse pajamas, so you'd be a fool not to watch it. I would like to add that the original question was asked by my good boy Shame, who's an amazing content creator. You should go and watch his work if you haven't already. He made a particularly good video on Ridley and Samus, and he also made some videos on Sonic that I think are good, and he should make more videos on Sonic that I think are good. Just putting my 2 cents out there, Shame. You gotta pay attention now. What has been your most difficult video to make so far? It's the videos you haven't seen. It's the Spectacular Spider-Man video I was writing and then abandoned because it took me a year, and in that time somebody else made a much shorter, better one. It's the video I did on Beauty and the Beast that I scrapped when I realised that everyone big was getting out there and doing it anyway. There are so many videos you haven't seen that have all been difficult to make in one way or another, and I consider them the most difficult because they just never happened. In terms of the videos I've released that were the most difficult, it was definitely Sly 3. Sly 3 was like pulling teeth, but eventually we got there. I just powered through, and that was a really great learning curve. I think I spoke about this in another one of these videos, because the process of that was super interesting, and I had to invent all sorts of rules for myself in order to make it happen. So that was an interesting way to do it, and incredibly difficult of all the ones I did. Something like the Fantastic Four video was actually less difficult, because even though it was a lot of work, maybe more work than any of the other videos, it was really quick to write. It was something that I always had a vision for, I guess. It's something I always knew what I wanted it to be and look like and feel like. So it was very easy to kind of, with that mental roadmap, sit down and flesh out from there. The fact that it took all this extra time is just was not difficult, it was just time consuming. It just goes to show my ongoing theory that the writing for me is the most difficult part of making any video. Some days it flows like wine and then everybody floats out of the living room like, oh, we did it, we're amazing. And most of the time your brain feels like and you have to try and work it out of being like. Any thoughts or feelings towards modern animated Disney feature films? Princess and the Frog was the last good one. After that, Tangled was okay, but it marked the beginning of the end. The minute the audience said, we want more of that product, then that was it. Game over. John Lasseter went up, said, you're doing that from now on, after telling all these animators he was going to protect them in 2D animation. Gee, I wonder how that guy turned out. And since then, I have seen some of the later Disney films and the Pixar ones, and none of them have done it for me. I'm really disappointed in the way that that's shaken out. But the good thing was that when I did see Princess and the Frog, I felt like I was done. Like, that movie really was everything I wanted to see in a Disney animated movie, just all bundled together. What feels like, you know, just pure joy and exuberance coming off of the lines on screen, drawn by the animators. It's quite unlike any of the other hand-drawn Disney movies, and it's really, really special. I really, really like that movie a lot, and I have a lot of good feelings towards it, and I cannot say that for any of the movies that have come out since, so I like to leave it there. Still not sure what I was supposed to get out of Frozen all these years later. That's a weird movie. Very weird movie. Biggest influences as a creator. Do you like any anime, manga, or French comics? So I'm just going to show some influences, just there, just ones that will come to me as I make this, and I'm probably leaving a billion out, but here are some of them. I'm a big fan of French comics. Tintin and Asterix have been my bread and butter for years. In terms of manga, no. And in terms of anime, not really. I'm not really a manga or anime guy. But I do, there is only one good anime. There's only one that counts and matters. Would you ever make a video exploring your feelings on a large JRPG? Hey Clemps. Yeah, so the RPG I was thinking of doing a video on was Dark Cloud and Dark Chronicle, known as Dark Cloud 2 in the States, which Clemps made 2 excellent videos on, and the truth is, anything that needs to be said is in those 2 videos. Yeah, I know, right? Not a manga or anime guy, but will totally play JRPGs. What's wrong with them? I actually am working on a video right now for one particular JRPG, but it's a bit of a cheat. It's not something I would say is a true JRPG. Maybe some will say that's actually not the case, and it is, but it's in Clemps' wheelhouse, so maybe he'll like it, so we'll see about that. Final Fantasy IX is something I've been thinking about saying something on, but I don't really know what exactly, so that's kind of a pipe dream. And I know Clemps is doing that as well, so that could be very interesting. I was almost considering making a video about the European stylings of anything that Level 5 has made. You look at any of their Dragon Quests, they're all based on European mythologies, Italian, Christian, Professor Layton. They made a football game. So yeah, maybe one day I'll do it, but for now I'm just gonna let Clemps tackle some of those subjects and you guys go watch what he says. What do you think of Rayman 3 as part of the Rayman franchise? Rayman 1 was the first game I ever played, first game on a console that I sat down at someone else's house and played through, and I thought it was magic. It completely changed my perspective of so many things. It's still carried with me to this day. I love Rayman. Rayman is very much something close to me. Rayman 2 was a game I was extremely excited for. It was on all the magazines. I always wanted to play it. I finally sat down to it a couple years after it came out. I never quite managed to really get hold of it in the time that it was popular. And I was somewhat underwhelmed. Visually, it's astounding. There's no other game with that kind of vibe. There's no other game that tried to make that sort of 2D texturing work in 3D in the same way. Crash was close, but it wasn't quite on the money as Rayman managed. And the designs, I mean, you look at Clark or Lee or the Robo-Pirates, one of the best designs for a villain I've ever seen in a game. Wonderful, very memorable game in those aspects. But as a game, I find that it gets pretty dull after like the 5th level. It sort of all blends together. There's not much differentiation in the journey. I find that while there are a couple of nice set pieces, it's just a bit thin. I could never really get truly into it. It wasn't the huge fun adventure I'd been sold on. And I also think, while it has a great vibe and atmosphere, it was really missing something the original Rayman had. Because that was a very funny game, and very overtly funny, and very manic. And then we got Rayman 3. Rayman 3 is crazy, it's funny, it's wild, it's zany, maybe too much for some. It's that perfect blend of the look of Rayman 2 and Rayman 1, with a, slightly more up-tempo, more modernized style. It's got all these great set pieces, all these varied and different crazy levels. The villains are great. I just really love it. I think that Rayman 3 is just a fun little adventure, and kind of what I was hoping for with Rayman 2. I actually think the plot is really interesting. It goes in some weird directions that pay off and build on the characters and just do more things with what feels like a bigger, wider world. And it's even more mysterious. It's got some wonderful music. I don't know what there is to dislike about Rayman 3, if I'm honest. Now, Michel Ancel didn't make Rayman 3. He'd made 1 and 2, and then he left to do Beyond Good and Evil, and then he came back and said, Rayman 3, I wasn't a big fan, was a bit concrete for my tastes. And I just remember thinking, but you made Beyond Good and Evil. I 100% get why Michel would be defensive about his baby. But I don't think he's done anything to back up that fear. I mean, he was on board with Rayman 4, and suddenly it became Raving Rabbids. Then Origins goes from being an episodic series to an admittedly fun Mario Bros. Wii U-inspired platformer, which kind of feels like it's missing a couple pages here and there, only to then, after a sequel, just, vanish off the face of the earth. I can't accuse him outright because I've got no idea what was happening at Ubisoft or how he's been treated, but I've seen so many projects seemingly slip through his fingers, and it kind of makes me retroactively defensive of Rayman 3. Seems like a miracle we even got to that game now, and it makes me appreciate it even more. If you were given the opportunity to make a movie for the MCU, which comic book character would you pick? Okay, so the character I would have picked, Moon Knight, he's actually becoming an MCU series now. So, aside the Fantastic Four, which I know they're going to make a movie of, all of the characters I would have chosen have been picked, except one. And the characters I'm thinking of are part of a team. I find them particularly interesting to the history of Marvel overall, and they are going to be in lieu of making a movie, because I ain't doing that for many reasons. They are going to be part of a series that I'm doing. So this is your scoop, that I'm doing another video in the vein of the Fantastic Four video, but with a completely different set of characters and in the style of a series. So it's going to be several videos, hopefully released reasonably close together. That is still in the process of being written. It actually was pretty quick to assemble, so it's not been terribly painful to get that one written, but it's a bit of a mammoth and I'm trying to rein it in. So look out for news on that. It's going to be quite some time before that's finalized, but I'm hoping to make that a thing for, at the very least, next year. So yeah, I've been working on that since January, so it's already quite a lot behind it. Let's hope it's good. It might not be, but I don't have any words. A huge thank you once again to all of my patrons for sticking by and for getting us to the 50k mark. I really, fell into all of this pretty much by accident, as I think a lot of people do, but it's still continuing to help me a lot in ways I didn't expect as a creator and as a... just in, terms of my life in certain weird ways. I mean, that's a whole bag I could open up and stick my head inside of there, but I'm not gonna, and instead I'm just gonna thank some of the people who helped get me to this point. Of course, people like Shaymay, Mr. Klemps, Cloud Cuckoo Country. These are amazing content creators that you need to check out if you haven't already. They're people who just make the kind of stuff that's on my wavelength, to be honest, and who are constant. I mean, Cuckoo Country has been nothing but supportive in quite scary ways, so I'm quite worried about messing with him, if I'm honest.
Like, who would ever think that this content is valuable in the slightest? This is trash content. Well, go subscribe to B-Mask.
People like Lord Mandalore and Shami, who have also helped push me to places I didn't think I'd go to, or taken part in projects. All of my voice actors who've ever been involved in my stuff, they might not believe it, but I'm keeping tabs on all of them. I know where you live. No, I don't. And I don't know if he's gonna appreciate this, but my biggest shout out goes to Charlie, who is just, my best friend in a lot of ways, and the guy... What is this, an Oscar speech? Well, just eat your medicine. 50k is really cool, and a lot of really cool people helped get us to that point, so let's see if we can keep riding on to 100k, and then see if we can keep riding on. I don't want to ride anywhere. I'm quite happy here. It's very late. I'm tired, boy. What time is it? Oh my god, it's nearly 7. I don't sleep anymore, but none of you do either, so this is embarrassing. Hey everyone, big ups on my Patreon, big ups to everyone who gave me Ko-fi tips as well. It's just been lovely to get everyone's support in all these different places, and oh, it appears I have one last question. I have one last question right here. Last question. Are all the sly hoes gone?